Hello everyone, welcome to my fellow crafters and sewers. Today we're going to be making a template for some bunting. We're going to make two templates. One is this more standard traditional pennant V-shaped flag, and the second has a lovely curved bottom to it, which is also very pretty. So I do find that bunting makes a lovely present for either a young child or even an older child, for hanging in their bedroom, as long as it's up out of the way and doesn't present any kind of health and safety risks to them. But also it's super for new babies as well when they've arrived. So my daughter's requested some bunting for her friend Sophie, who's had a little baby boy called Albie, and so we're going to be making bunting for Lucinda to give to Sophie as a present. So I thought I'd make the template with you, and then you can join along, and we will in future videos make the bunting. Okay, so you're going to need some supplies. You're going to need some cardboard, and here I've just got a piece of corrugated cardboard that was out of the middle of a packaging for bedding, but you can use a cereal box at all, or any other kind of cardboard, just as long as it's big enough for what you need. So that's absolutely fine. The other thing you're going to need is a ruler. I'm using a clear quilter's ruler because the mark's really easy to see, but you can also use the normal kind of ruler you'd use for schoolwork if you've got one of those hanging around. You also need a pen or a pencil. Now I do find that if you have a finer line rather than a felt tip pen, you'll get a cleaner edge to your template, because if you use too thick a line, you can then wobble as you're cutting it out, and it just doesn't give you a good end result. And the other thing that you'll need is some scissors. So just make sure that you're using your paper and crafting scissors and not your fabric scissors, because obviously we don't want the fabric police to be after you. Okay, grab your supplies and we'll get started. Okay, so I have got my older version, but what I've found is of my template, is that when I've made this, one of the sides mustn't be quite as straight as the other, or I might have nicked a bit off when I've been cutting it out, so it's been used a few times. So I'm going to make a new, more precise one, and then I thought that you'd be able to join in with me to do that. There's a couple of things that we're going to do. First of all, we're going to get the line across the top, and that'll give us the straight line for down the centre. If we join the two side bits together at an equal length, they also will give us a nice symmetrical shape to use. However, we've also got to add seam allowance to it. So if we just measure at the top, starting from the finished edge, we won't have enough room to add our seam allowance. So let's get started, and hopefully this will all make sense as we start to cut it out. So this is for the triangular one, obviously. So my existing piece of cardboard is, let's use this way round, it was a bit long for that, is 7 inches across the top. So let's go ahead, and in the middle of our piece of cardboard we're going to mark 7 inches. So just a mark at 0, a mark at 7, and we're also going to mark the middle, which is 3.5 on this. Okay. So we've just got 3 marks on the bottom of our piece of card, and what we've done is we've made sure that we don't start right at the very edge, because we need to be able to add our seam allowance on the side of that finished piece. Okay. This bunting as well, which I found has worked very nicely in terms of length, is actually 8 inches long. So from this centre point here, we can line our quilting ruler up with the edge of the cardboard, and we're going to draw a line down to the 8-inch mark. Okay, nice and clear. That's going to be our centre line. Next, we're going to join that 8-inch mark up to the 7-inch line on the side, and also to the mark we made at 0 on the other side. So these are just joining up to the tip. Okay, so you should have something that resembles this on your piece of card. Next, we're going to add seam allowance. Now, because we are not putting any strain on the seam allowance, we're just going to add 1/4 inch. It's just to protect against fraying. So on our ruler, we look for the 1/4 inch mark, and we're just going to lay that so that we can mark off 1/4 inch. Now, when you mark this, go past the point on your template, I'll show you in a second what I mean by that, on each side, because that will actually make it easier for you to see where the crossover point is without you having to go back and redraw it in. Okay, so you should have something that resembles this. So we've gone past the point, there's the point where our finished point where it will be for our bunting, and just here we've gone past it with our line, so we've got an extra V there. Now we've also got the lines at the bottom here with our 1/4 inch seam allowance, and if you need to, just mark that up so that you know what that is, because sometimes it's easy to forget. And just put 1/4 inch on the end and you'll remember then what you've drawn it at, 1/4 inch. Okay, so the next thing then we need to do is, because when you sew down to the point of a flag, you're going to get a lot of bulk otherwise. And what we actually don't need to do is we don't need to cut down all the way down to that point, because we're not going to use it. And so I know it's only millimetres of fabric that we're saving, but it's better to be frugal with it if we can, and it makes it go further. It costs a lot of money, doesn't it, to buy all this lovely fabric. So we're going to then, now what I'm going to do is just going to square off the bottom of the template, and to do that I'm just measuring 1/4 inch away from the end of the bottom of the point, and I've drawn a line. So if you can see just there, there's a line drawn across there, and that's 1/4 inch from that point to there. Okay. Next thing to do is to cut it out. So we're going to cut out along the seam allowance line. Take your time. Can be a little bit tricky. Get this tool right, but we need the thickness of the card, so we want to be using that. So if you just go past the point and then come down the other side, you'll be able to just follow that along. And this is where these thin lines do help, because as you can see it can be a bit tricky, and this way at least you know you're in the right area. Okay, so we have cut out our shape, and now what I'm going to do is just cut off that point, because we don't need that, that's just wasted fabric, or it will be. And so what you should end up with is a template the same as this. So we've got our main body of our pennant, our flag, and then we've got a seam allowance down one side and the seam allowance down the other. Okay, that's your completed template, and we'll be able to use this now for making some flags. So on to how to make the curved template now for you. In order to make the curved bunting, we are going to do it slightly differently. Because on your triangular shape, because the shape narrows, in order to have enough space at the bottom here, you need to have a slightly longer template, or a longer flag, because if you have a wide letter, say like an M, then you're very wide at the bottom, and you need to have the width here for your alphabet to be able to fit onto your chosen flag. When you're dealing with a more rectangular shape, you don't have that problem because it's the same all the way down. So what we're going to do is we're going to just narrow the top of the flag, so we'll have slightly narrow at the top, but then we'll have still have the same width all the way down, which will be useful then for putting our letters on. So in order to do that, we'll use the same sort of theory. So this was 7 inches, so I think we're going to go to 5 inches for our next flag, for our circle. So again, we're going to start in just in from the edge. We're not going to go right up to the edge, but we're going to mark 0. We're going to mark 5, and in this time we're going to mark 2.5, because 2.5 is obviously half of 5. And again, the bunting on here was long because it had to go down all the way down to the point, but I think if we mark this down to say 6 inches, I think that will be long enough. So on the middle point, I'm going to line up and I'm going to mark down to 6 inches. I'm also going to mark 6 inches down on the 2 side marks, one at 0 and and the one at the 5-inch mark as well on the side here. So we've got 3 lines going down at the moment, and I'm just going to square those off at the end as well. You can make sure, this also helps make sure that everything is straight as well. So what we're going to do then next is we're actually going to draw up 1 inch on either side of the 2 outside lines, and this is where our curve is going to be positioned. So then take a circular object, in this case I've got a plate to give me a nice little curve at the bottom. This one is a dinner plate. What size is this, just so that I can give you an idea? This one is a 10.5-inch plate, so 10.5 inches, about 26 centimetres. And we're going to just pop that onto the edge. Now we mark up so that the edge of the plate touches the centre mark at the bottom and the 1 inch mark on the side, and we just draw a line round. And then we do the same on the other side. And this should give us a nice curve to the bottom of the flag. And again, we can just make sure that that's not too deep. So mine's going down to a point at the moment, so I'm just going to take that off slightly. But that's fine. It's all right. Not rocket science, is it? We can adjust this as we go. Okay. So we now have our two. Oh, this is upside down, isn't it? I suppose. So we've got the side of our flag, and we've now got a curved bottom to the flag. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add our seam allowance, and we're going to add on 1/4 inch like we did before. So just extend your line slightly past where that curved line is. And then if you want to use a seam gauge, which is one of these, very nice and easy, just slide your indicator down to the 1/4 inch mark on the side, and then you can just use that to follow the line and to your curved line, and that will allow you to just draw a line that will then be curved. So I'm just doing little marks along, and then I'll just go back and just join those together. And take it all the way out to your seam allowance line. As before, let's write in our seam allowances so we know. So that's useful when you go to your sewing machine. And on the bottom. As long as you know what it means, that's all that matters. And so we can then take our scissors. So these are our craft scissors, not our fabric scissors. Cut on the line going down the edge. And same the other side. It's a bit tricky to cut through sometimes. And then making sure we follow the curved line, our curved seam allowance line, we are going to cut around the bottom of the template. Okay, and there we are. Have our flag shape with our curved edge that we can use now. And our letters will sit nicely in the centre there, and we'll have our bias trim attached to the edge. So there we go. How to make bunting templates 2 different ways. Thank you for watching.